He was more than a prisoner. He was a father, a husband, a man who vanished without a goodbye. For 20 years, his name was a whisper in the dark, until now. Part 3 reveals the heartbreak, the reunion, and the shattering truth that will change their lives forever.
A strange chill passed between them. John is a strong name, Joshua said carefully. It means God is gracious. Tony nodded slowly. Maybe that's what I need. Grace. Neither of them understood what had just happened, but a thread had been tied. And soon, it would start pulling everything together. Joshua had promised to bring a book the next day, a novel about a man who rediscovered himself after years of wandering. But that day never came. Tony waited. Morning passed. Then afternoon. No Joshua. The next day came. Still no sign. 3 days. 4. Tony grew restless. He asked a guard. The man shrugged. The copper had an accident. He's in the hospital. I hear it's serious. Coma. Everything around Tony seemed to crumble. His hands trembled. He couldn't sleep that night. A kind of panic took hold of him that he hadn't felt in years. He paced his cell. Prayed. Begged. Wished. When he asked to visit, they refused. You're an inmate. Not even sentenced yet. You have no privileges. Tony pleaded daily. Please, let me just see him. Just for a moment. After 3 weeks of persistence, one of the counselors finally intervened. He won't stop asking, she told the warden. He's not a danger. Let him go, but with staff supervision. Permission was granted. Tony's eyes filled with gratitude. It was the first time he would step outside those prison gates in 20 years. He didn't know that stepping into that hospital would open the door to everything he had lost. The hospital hallway was quiet as Tony walked with cautious steps, escorted by a guard. The place smelled of antiseptic and clean linen. His heart pounded with every turn. When they reached the ward, he saw Joshua lying still on a hospital bed, bandaged, pale, unconscious. Machines beeped quietly beside him. Tony approached, sat beside him, and whispered, "Wake up, my boy. You have a life to live. Stories to tell. I'm not letting go of you too." As he held Joshua's hand, the ward door opened suddenly. A woman stepped in, holding a food flask. Her eyes widened the moment she saw him. Her hand dropped the flask. It clattered to the floor. She ran toward him and threw her arms around his neck. "Dear, is this you?" Tony froze. The guard grabbed her. "Madam, please, this is a prisoner." But she didn't care. "You're my husband. John. My God, what happened to you?" Tony's body stiffened. "Ma. I don't know you," he said gently. Tears streamed down her face. "It's me, Sonia. Your wife." Tony stared at her. Her voice felt familiar. Her touch, warm. But his mind was blank. Still, something deep within him stirred, something odd, something real. The room was filled with silence after Sonia's outburst. The hospital staff tried to calm her, but she refused to let go of Tony's hand. Her heart knew what her eyes saw, this was no mistake. The face might be older, tired, and changed, but it was him. Tony gently pulled away. "I'm sorry. I don't remember you." Sonia's eyes welled again. "Your name is John. You left 20 years ago, you never returned. Our son," she pointed to the unconscious boy, "is your son." The words hit him like a wave, but his mind was an empty shore. "I don't know any of this." The staff were confused. The guard stood alert, unsure of what to do. Sonia took a deep breath. "You love jollof rice. You had a scar on your shoulder from a bicycle accident as a child. You had a Bible your mother gave you, you carried it everywhere. You bought baby clothes from Port Harcourt before the trip. Tony sat slowly, his hands shaking. I dream of fire. And a woman crying. I thought it was just my imagination. It wasn't, Sonia whispered. It was me. But for now, he could only remember the dreams, not the reality. 2 weeks passed. Tony had returned to prison. He asked daily for updates about Joshua. He spent more time in prayer, more time staring at the small window above his bed. Then, one afternoon, a guard walked in with a smile. Your boy woke up. Tony stood so quickly he almost stumbled. He pressed his hands against the bars, eyes wide. Is he talking? The guard nodded. He's weak, but he asked about you. A week later, Sonia visited Tony again, this time with permission. She brought food, a small framed photo of their wedding day, and the gold chain with the "My Daddy, My Hero" pendant. I've told Joshua everything, she said. He's listening. But we need to be sure. Tony sat quietly. I wish I could remember. But something inside me aches when I see him. Like something lost. Sonia reached into her bag and pulled out a form. DNA test. We need proof. It's the only way to convince them to reopen your case. Tony took it. His fingers trembled. What if I'm not him? You are, Sonia whispered. But let the truth speak. He looked down at the form, then at the photo. For the first time in years, he felt afraid, not of prison, but of hope. Joshua sat up in bed, weak but recovering. The doctor said it was a miracle he survived the accident. But his mind was on something else, on the man they called Tony. On the words his mother whispered. On the weight of a truth too big to ignore. Mom, you're sure? He asked softly. Sonia nodded. I've never been more certain. That man is your father. Joshua looked out the window of his ward. He didn't want to hope. What if it wasn't true? What if this was just grief, clinging to a ghost? Still, the thought haunted him, Uncle Tony, the man he had come to respect, to admire, to love like family, might actually be blood. He remembered the way Tony laughed at his jokes. The way he spoke with quiet wisdom. The way his hands trembled the day he visited the hospital. Something deep inside him whispered, he belongs to you. Joshua decided. Let's do the test. A week later, samples were taken and sent. Waiting was the hardest part. But something had already changed. Joshua no longer visited Tony as a volunteer. He visited him as a son looking for a father. And the answer was only days away. The day the results arrived, Sonia held the sealed envelope in her hands like a sacred scroll. She stood in the hospital room with Joshua beside her. His heart pounded. He had faced exams, interviews, and national service, but nothing prepared him for this. She opened it slowly, fingers trembling. 99.9% match, positive. Sonia gasped. Tears fell freely. Joshua closed his eyes and let the truth wash over him. He's my father. He picked up his phone, still trembling, and dialed Tony's correctional facility. The voice on the other end answered. Hello. This is Joshua, he said. Tell Mr. Tony, tell my father I'm coming. He took a deep breath and called his mother next. You were right, he said. He's John. Sonia broke into tears again. 20 years of pain, waiting, and prayers had led to this one sentence. But the battle wasn't over. Tony was still behind bars. No trial. No justice. Just a name and a number. Joshua wiped his face and stood up. If he waited 20 years for me, he said, then I'll fight like 20 years worth of storms to get him out. And so began the next chapter, the battle for justice. Joshua, now armed with DNA proof, refused to rest. He met with lawyers, correctional officers, and even petitioned the Human Rights Commission. He gathered every report, every document from the prison archives. The truth was chilling. Tony had been listed as unknown suspect, awaiting trial for 2 decades. How does someone get lost in the system like this? Joshua asked one of the officers. The man sighed. It happens more than you think. No ID, no memory, no advocate, they disappear. Not anymore, Joshua said. He wrote letters, filed complaints, talked to journalists. He even used social media, telling the world about the man who was wrongly imprisoned for 20 years. People began to notice. The story trended locally. Man jailed for 20 years without trial reunites with son. It touched a nerve across the country. Within weeks, a judge reviewed the case. The DNA was undeniable. The inconsistencies too obvious. A court date was set. When Tony was brought to the courtroom in chains, he saw Joshua sitting at the front bench, eyes locked on his. For the first time, Tony spoke his real name to the judge. My name is John Eromosil, and I am innocent. The courtroom held its breath. The verdict came swiftly. After hearing the evidence, the DNA match, the absence of legal representation, the testimony from prison staff, and the lack of trial for 20 years, the judge rose with visible emotion. This man was failed by the system, she said. He was robbed of his identity, his freedom, and his family. Today, we restore his name, his dignity, and his future. The courtroom applauded softly. Tony, now John again, stood slowly as the chains were removed. His hands trembled. His vision blurred with tears. Joshua ran to him and embraced him tightly. Welcome home, Daddy. John's knees buckled, and they sat together on the bench, hugging, weeping like lost souls finally found. Sonia rushed toward them, clinging to John like a dream she never let die. I told you I'd wait, she whispered. John nodded, his voice cracking. And I told you I'd come back. I just forgot how. Outside the court, journalists gathered. But the small family ignored the cameras. They walked down the steps slowly, hand in hand, a man once forgotten, now remembered. The sun hit John's face, and for the first time in 20 years, he didn't blink. He smiled. He was free. John sat quietly in the living room of Sonia's small but cozy house. It was strange being outside. The smells were different. The air was open. The walls didn't close in. Sonia made him his favorite stew, or what she hoped was still his favorite. Joshua played soft music from his speaker as they sat together after dinner. I keep thinking I'll wake up, John said. You're awake, Sonia replied, holding his hand. Memories returned slowly. Not in full scenes, but in fragments. The smell of Sonia's food. The sound of baby shoes in a plastic bag. The jingle of keys from his old car. Do you remember our walks after work? She asked one evening. He smiled faintly. I remember your laugh. It always came before your jokes. They laughed together. Bit by bit, the fog lifted. John started helping around the house. He'd walk with Joshua in the evening, asking about his studies, his dreams. And every day, the bond between father and son grew stronger. Still, a question lingered in John's mind. Did I have a bank account? He asked one afternoon. Sonia paused, eyes wide. Yes. You gave me a checkbook, signed pages. But the account was never closed. And with that, another door creaked open. One that would change everything once again. Monday morning. John stood in front of the bank building, now renovated and gleaming like something out of a dream. It had been 20 years, but something about it still looked familiar. Joshua stood beside him, calm but alert. Sonia waited in the car, hands folded tightly in her lap. They walked in. The bank's cooler hit them like a wave. John stepped up to the customer service desk. "Good morning. I'd like to check the status of an old account." "The name is John Eromasil." The young lady behind the desk hesitated, searching his face. "Sir, do you have ID?" John handed her the court-issued clearance and the old account documents Sonia had kept safe. She scanned them, tapped on her keyboard, and her eyes slowly widened. "Sir, this account was never closed. It's been rolling over investments automatically, with interest accrued." She paused. John leaned forward. "How much?" She turned her screen toward him. 237 million naira. The room tilted. John sat down, stunned. Joshua stared. Sonia walked in, sensing something had happened. The banker smiled. "Sir, you're a wealthy man." Tears fell silently down John's face. Not because of the money, but because after everything, something had waited for him. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The bank released his funds after verification. Lawyers finalized the paperwork. His name, his real name, was restored in every system. The prison formally issued a public apology. But John didn't rush to buy luxury. He bought a modest home first, warm, airy, with a big kitchen for Sonia and a garden Joshua could pray in. Then he invested in Sonia's dream, Sonia's Kitchen Deluxe, a full-scale restaurant, beautifully designed, with staff, uniforms, and a glowing sign. It opened with tears and laughter. John cut the ribbon. Sonia held the scissors with him. Joshua gave a small speech. The guests clapped, and neighbors came to eat and celebrate. John also set up a scholarship fund in his name, the Forgotten Hope Initiative, dedicated to helping prisoners awaiting trial get legal aid and second chances. He didn't forget the men he left behind. Every month, he visited the prison, not as a convict, but as a brother. He taught classes, shared his story, and reminded them, it's not over until you stop believing. The scars didn't vanish overnight. But healing had begun. And the past no longer held him prisoner. Stories began to spread. People called Sonia the woman who waited. Journalists featured their story in newspapers and TV. From prison to purpose. The man they forgot. The wife who believed. John found it overwhelming. Fame was never his dream. Peace was. And he found peace in the small things, walking with Sonia at sunset, watching Joshua mentor youth, cooking on Sundays like they used to do long ago. One evening, he and Sonia stood on their balcony, watching city lights flicker in the distance. "You know," he said softly, "when I was in that prison, I used to stare at a crack in the wall for hours. I thought that crack was all the future I'd ever see." Sonia touched his face gently. "Now look at us." He smiled. "You saved me. You and Joshua. You never gave up." She leaned in and whispered, "Neither did you. You just forgot who you were. But your spirit never died." They stood in silence, arms wrapped around each other, as peace settled like a blanket over them. John had lost time, but he hadn't lost everything. He still had love. He still had purpose. And now, he had time again. One morning, Sonia woke John early. "Get dressed," she said. "We are going somewhere." He groaned playfully but obeyed. They drove for almost 2 hours until they arrived at a school, a quiet place with painted classrooms and echoing laughter. "What's this?" he asked. Sonia smiled. "Your first scholarship award presentation. The boy's name is Elijah. He's 16. His father is awaiting trial, just like you were." John stepped into the hall. Dozens of students and their parents waited. At the center sat Elijah, wide-eyed, shy, hopeful. John told his story. No theatrics. Just truth. I lost 20 years of my life because no one spoke up for me. But I found my family. I found my faith. And now, I want others to know they matter. When he handed the certificate to Elijah, the boy clutched it and cried. You just gave him a future, Sonia whispered. John nodded. And maybe a reason to believe. That night, he sat in his home office, writing letters to old inmates, some still inside, some recently released. He encouraged them, supported them, fought for them. The pain of yesterday had become the strength of today. And John had come full circle, from forgotten to remembered. Years passed. Sonia's restaurant became a franchise. Joshua graduated from law school and opened his own practice, specializing in human rights cases. John grew older, slower, but never idle. He walked his granddaughter to school, taught Bible study at church, and still visited the correctional center every month. One afternoon, he sat under a tree in their compound. A group of young men sat around him, listening as he told his story again, not for attention, but for impact. When they forgot my name, I thought I didn't matter. But you see, he pointed to his chest, identity isn't in memory. It's in the soul. God knew me. My wife knew me. My son knew me even when I didn't know myself. One of the boys asked, Uncle, do you ever regret those lost years? John looked up at the sky. No, he said. Because pain brought me here. And here is a good place. The boys clapped, inspired. Sonia called from the kitchen, John. Food is ready. He smiled. Even after everything, she still feeds me. He stood, dusted his trousers, and walked slowly toward the door. The world had called him Tony. But his name, the one God gave him, was John. And he had finally come home.
He thought freedom meant walking out of those prison gates. But what awaited him outside was another kind of prison. The weight of lost years, broken dreams, and the fear of starting over. Yet, sometimes the hardest goodbyes lead to the most beautiful hellos. From a forgotten prison cell to an unforgettable reunion, this journey has shown us the strength of the human spirit, the power of truth, and the healing that comes from love and forgiveness. Life may not always give us justice on time, but it can still give us redemption in the end. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. And before you go, hit that subscribe button and join us for more true and powerful stories that the world needs to hear.